There we are. I wanted to make sure we didn't have background music playing after the countdown was done. So, hi, welcome back to Pour Over Marketing. It is happy hour. I can see we already have somebody watching. So, get in those comments and let's start talking. I have lots of things I want to talk about today, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about what you want to talk about. So, if you have questions, you want to start a conversation, throw into those comment section. Boy, I'm already stumbling over my words. This is what happy hour does to me. You'd think that I'd be worse in the morning. I seem to be worse at night. That's what happens. But it's much cooler looking at night, isn't it? Plus, you can see it's still daylight out. So, all right. Let's get to it. Let's close this and stop sharing. And there we go. So, there are topics I want to cover tonight. Oh, I've got a comment. Let's see. Oh, you're sundowning. Thank you, Shoshana, for saying that. I am not. I just was trying to do too much. I really need a producer like manning the computer while I do this because there's a lot of switching that you have to do. This was so far the most seamless that we've had. But, well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here, Shoshana. So, this is actually your big shot before other people get in here and start dominating the conversation. Did you have any questions, anything you wanted me to cover or talk about? You better make it fast. I see there's already a second person in here. I'm so glad you made it, Shoshana. This is your first time seeing this show. And if you don't, I understand. I can just start talking. We have 3 people in here now. So anybody that's here, say hi in the comment section. If you have a question or anything to get us going, feel free. It is an AMA. We may have some of my students showing up tonight. I invited them. I invited a bunch of writers. I invited all sorts of people. How valuable, here we go. How valuable is live marketing over social media? So, Shoshana, just to clarify, you mean doing what I'm doing right now. How valuable is it to jump on and do a live thing and see if people will respond? Is that what you're asking me? You're asking 2 questions. Hold on. Answer that first one. How valuable is live marketing over social media? What do you think? Is this what you're talking about? Is something like what I'm doing now, like going live on Instagram? Yes, and or Facebook or Instagram. Yes. Okay, how valuable is it? Actually incredibly valuable. But not everybody can do it or feels comfortable with it. One of the big lessons that I always talk about on here, hi Serena, is do what you're comfortable with. So for example, one of our rules that we have is pick 2 social media platforms and stick to those. Find 2 that you're comfortable with. If you know you can post to Instagram and Facebook, go with those. If you can maybe once a week go live, do something live, yeah, that's super valuable. This show was supposed to be just an AMA that I was going to do on an occasional Saturday morning, but I have a lot of people that are coming now, regulars, and people writing me afterwards. The watches after the fact when it's not live are really good. But it's the fact that it's live, I think, that makes all the difference. So is it valuable? Yeah, it can be super valuable. Does everybody need to do it? No. You got to go with what you're comfortable with, and you got to go where your audience is. If I was doing this live every week and there was nobody ever here, what's the value in being live? Then I could pre-record stuff. Your next question. Yes, plus posting and TikTok. It's a mix. All of it's a mix. One of the things that I always talk about is you want to go where the food is. So if your audience is on TikTok, but you're not, guess what? You need to be. You want to try to be wherever you can, but you also have to go with what you know you can handle. For most people, 2 is kind of the limit when they're starting out. As you do it more and you get more comfortable with it, that's when you start expanding outwards and start saying, hey, I could add this in or I could add that in. So TikTok Live is fantastic, but you have to have 1,000 followers to do it. So if you're not on TikTok right now, if you want to get on it and start building an audience and start building towards a live thing. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing live things on Twitch. I'm going to be doing that with authors. Spoiler, that's coming. That's going to be an announcement coming soon. I'm also going to be doing it with my podcast network, with Southgate Media Group. We are going to do some live things there on Twitch. From Twitch, we can push it to YouTube and to Facebook and to wherever we want. To answer your other question before we get into the other part of it, and this is Shoshana's making it about us as for the authors, does putting our books into the public library help us? Same concept that I just gave. The short answer is yes. You want to be where the audience is. So if you can get your stuff in a public library, absolutely. Now, the trick to it, if you read the newsletter that I sent out now, anyone that's not in Four Horsemen would not have seen this, but the Four Horsemen authors, I put this in there. Something that my wife Maeve found is you can go to your library, the one that you have a card with, and you can request they get a book. What I had wanted was for them to request like the same book at all the libraries to see what would happen. But authors like to get their books in. So contact your public library. You go on their website. There's a place where you can request they get copies of books and request your books and see what happens. Once they start getting our books, and a couple of people have done this and started bringing in from our website, that's where they're going to usually go, is there or Ingram, then they're going to start getting comfortable with ordering from us. So yeah, you definitely do. You want to get them in the libraries if you can, because once again, you always go where the audience is. It's one of the reasons that we have Writers Row, where we go to the cons. We saw a huge area of opportunity where there aren't a lot of authors there, and individual tables for authors is great, but bringing what we bring really cements what authors can do and how interesting it can be with people. So there you go. Okay. Before I keep going with the topic of the day, which I will be definitely getting to, anyone else have any questions? Anyone want to jump in with something before I start going off? And once again, you guys can always interrupt me. You can always start chiming in about other stuff. There's Tanya, Love Writers Row at Con. Heck yeah. And Tanya, I just made more contacts today for Louisville. I think we're going to be even better. I'm really excited about Louisville. So those of you that are watching, if you want to meet me, meet my family, meet the Four Horsemen people, and then I can't say, come to Louisville PopCon, which is going to be in August, and it's going to be awesome. And then Shoshana said, when do you come to the West Coast? Someday. It's tricky. Writers Row, because of the display that we have to cross a threshold of money that we know we're going to make or that we get brought to do to get the equipment there alone. Here we have to go within driving distance. It's all sitting in my garage. And then Erica has books in her that she brings. And it's like, if we go too far, like we were talking to a UK thing, that's a big trick and very expensive. And what was this? Hopefully, you know what? I have my own panel room. So Tanya, there's a good chance they're going to overlap. But if you tell me, who knows, maybe I can work it out that you know, if you tell me your time, I can switch things around so you won't miss Pour Over or Geektastic Cage Match. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about. This has been a big thing. On the last Pour Over, I made the big announcement that our podcast network is back. Southgate Media Group 2.0, it's back. It's happening. In fact, we've signed our first podcast. And the only reason we've only got one is I haven't put it out there. All I did was contact one podcast and they said, try this other one too. The first one, with what we're going to do, and that's part of the topic we're going to talk about here, what we're doing as a network is unlike what anybody else is doing. And it requires a little extra. And this other show I talked to that I thought maybe not, they just felt like, man, I'm not going to have the time to commit to do this. Okay. I always say that and put a yet at the end of it, because once they see what we're doing, I know they're going to be like, yeah, we got to do this thing. But the other show was with another network. They'd been with our network originally. When we let everybody go, they were floundering. They did it on their own for a while. Then they wanted a network. They tried that and they said it still wasn't doing what a network's supposed to do, which was the thing from the very beginning that I fought with. What does a network do for you? And I said that from the very beginning to every podcaster we had, because I didn't think we were doing it, but I didn't know anyone else that was doing it either. And it took me until now to have a vision around it to say, this is what a network does. And Maeve and I have really talked out all these different aspects of what a network can do for you and what it should do. And that's what we call it SMG, Southgate Media Group 2.0 is. So we'll talk about networks later. Let's talk about podcasts. So why am I hyped on podcasts? Now, first of all, you have to define a couple of things for yourself. If you were talking to me about starting a podcast, first of all, you want to talk about the why. Why are you doing it? Do you have a goal for it? And there's that word I say all the time. Also, and it could be nothing. It could be, I want to talk with my buddies, and like we watch movies and we get drunk and we talk about them and we think it's hilarious. Great. Do it. Far be it from me to stand in the way of that. Now, if your goal was to make money with it, I would tell you that's never going to make money. Just not going to happen. There's a lot of reasons why. So you want to figure out, what's our goal? The bigger thing you have to figure out is if you are serious about it. And that's what we're looking for with our network. It's like people that are really serious, even if it's your hobby. I don't like to do a hobby that I can't do something with. I get fulfilled by making a business out of it, or at least having some type of success parameter attached to it. So that's what you need to ask yourself first and foremost. What does success mean? And mean in that paradigm. So you're an artist, you're doing Artist Alley, and you've got your prints that you're selling. And I say, what is success to you? The short answer might be, oh my God, to make $1 million. Okay. Well, you're not going to do it at one con. So you're not going to hit that success parameter. But what is success? Is it brand building, meeting people, getting your name out there, and feeling afterwards like, hey, I got 10 names, but these are a good 10 names. That's a success. Is it selling enough to pay for your table, pay for gas money, and maybe have $100 left over? Like, if you've never done that before, that's a success. And then where is that bar later? So if you're an author and you put out your first book and like your residuals are not really high and all that, ask yourself, well, first of all, am I able to hit whatever I think of as success with one book? Do I have to get to 3 books? Do I have to get to 5 books? There's an author I was talking to recently that it was saying just this. They're like, I feel like it's not happening fast enough, and I should be the next, so-and-so. And I see these people come out and they get 1 book and bam. And it's like, yeah, that is a rarity. That is an outlier. It does happen. Most authors, you got to get to 20 books before you can quit your day job. And even that takes luck. There are authors out there with 20 books that never penetrated that way, but maybe they're really happy with it. We had a podcaster that was in our network who, for a while, I was sharing what everybody's numbers were each month. Okay. And this person was always at the bottom. Yet they were like that meme. You ever see that meme where it shows the guy with the champagne thing and he's like, woo, he's got the medal on his chest and you think it's a gold medal winner, and then it pulls back and there's like 4 guys, and it pulls back further, and he's like, by the time it hits the end, he's like 20th guy in line, but he's celebrating because he won a gold medal, or a medal. At that point, it's probably cardboard, but he won a medal. That was success to this guy. He's like, yeah, that's what this person was like. Their numbers were at the bottom, but they were celebrating. They would tell me, they were like, oh man, I had 10 listens to every show this month. I celebrated right along with them because to them that was success. They didn't think they were going to hit that number. They were doing it because they loved doing it. They thought this is a great outlet. They were having fun with it. Their idea of success was getting a few listens and not just talking into the void, right? So you have to ask yourself, and this is when I'm saying this, I'm talking about podcasting. I'm frameworking it that way because that is kind of what I want to talk about tonight. But for you guys, look at what you do. Figure out what that paradigm is. What is that? What are your benchmarks? What do you think success is? And it could be per thing. Tanya, you said you're going to Louisville. You're going to do a couple panels. I can think of people that have been here in our chat that getting a panel was like the ultimate success to them. They're already doing other stuff, but they're like, I could never crack that code. They crack that code, and now and I watch them. They're celebrating. They're like, I am totally doing panels. That's where the success line was for them. So find out what your success line is and figure out, like with our network, we're trying to say, what is a success line and does it match what we think the success line should be? Is it a hobby? Is it a professional hobby? Or is this like, there's one guy that I've talked to, his goal is to be able to, fund his family off of this. Now, is he going to do it off one podcast? Highly unlikely. In fact, I know what he's doing. It's not going to happen. But could he do it? I would argue that I did. When we walked off a cliff, we had nothing but the idea for a podcast network. That was 11 years ago. Here we are again, restarting it, redoing it with an idea of how we could actually make money. And eventually, in the beginning, it's not going to be enough. It's going to be just a sliver of what we need. But we now have a roadmap, right? All right. Got to say hi to Bruce. Bruce has joined us. Let's see. Bruce, big audience tonight. Yeah, it is. Love it. We're going to keep trying to grow it too. We're actively trying things. I'm starting to market it more and talk about it more. What about podcasts run over Patreon? Now that is a great idea, Shoshana. So you're leading into, I'm going to get back to that because that leads into what I wanted to talk about. Let's see what Tanya said, but you also have to do the first thing you know how to change and morph it. Yes. Yeah. That's why we always treated our network kind of as an incubator. Like nobody here, well, in the beginning had podcasted. Then we took a few in that had, but at the beginning they hadn't podcasted. They just really wanted to do it. It was like, yeah, get your feet wet, try it out. You had a commitment. You got to do 12 episodes. After 12 episodes, if it's like not right for you, that's good. Go ahead. We have the same thing with our new network. You sign a 6-month contract, you have to do 12 episodes in that 6-month time frame, unless you have a business plan that shows me something different. So if you are doing like an investigative report and it's going to be 6 episodes, but you have it all mapped out and it's okay, 6 episodes. That works for me. That's a rarity. If you're going to start a game, what about games? I'm doing a podcast about games and every week we're going to feature a different game. You have to guarantee me 12 episodes because 3 episodes don't do any of us any good. You're going to lose all your audience because you're going to ghost them after 3. At 12, you might actually put something out there that lasts a little while. We've got podcasts that are in our stable from before. Like I said, there have been 150 podcasts in our stable. There are podcasts that only did 1 season, 12 episodes, that I have not turned off because every month they have listens. There's an audience, a new audience checking them out because there's no way it's the same people going back and listening to the same hour of podcast over and over and over. And I can always tell because I see them binge. They might come in at like episode 6, and then all of a sudden I'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. I'm like, oh, okay, that was a person that binged it. They found this episode and they went back to the beginning. So back to podcasting. Actually, do you guys have questions before I go on? It doesn't have to be about podcasts. It could be about anything. Is it about my awesome mug? Look at that. I love indie podcasts. That's swag. Where do you find? Oh, wait, hold on a second. Shoshana, where do you find a podcast? Well, I would tell you everywhere. Uh, here's the deal. That's a legit question because there are people out there that don't listen, that don't know yet. You can go to like Apple Podcasts. You can use the apps. There's Spotify has them if you use Spotify. Google had them. They're just canceling it now. Amazon even has podcasts. Like they're kind of in all these different places. What I do is I put it through a thing called Libsyn, which is what creates my RSS feed, which is how you create an RSS feed, you put your podcast in, and it goes out to these different places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and that's how they get the shows. Okay. And if you set it up right, it's automatic. So I set it up once. I go in and I would actually do more than anyone I know. I would do everyone I could find, which was about 45 different outlets, and go and make sure each one of them had my RSS feed. Most people just let it go to like 3 and they're like, that's good enough. I'd make it go to every one of them. So it takes a while. One of the things I did as an executive producer. And then from there, I'll take the episode and share it on my Facebook page. Share it on wherever. So where are you listening to your podcast? There. Right on my page. Or on the page for the show. In the UK, here I'm talking about Spotify and all these things. Now Spotify is from the UK and they have it there. But the number one outlet for podcasts is YouTube. People driving their car have YouTube on their phone, and some like the video, but most people when they're driving, you can't watch the video, so they just listen. So if you have a show that just has an image and it has the audio playing, big listens in the UK. RSS feed, I don't know what it stands for. I did. You know what? It's Thursday night, Shoshana. I'm having sundowners, as you said earlier, in the thread, in case. There we go. You're sundowning. See? Shoshana's being mean to me. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's basically, it's where your, but what does it do? What it is, and Corey, I see what you said. I'm going to get to you in a second. What it is it's an address, an internet address. Oh, I can put this in terms that you're gonna get here because you do it already. So, Shoshana, you have a newsletter. I put it out through MailChimp, right? It is also on your website. If somebody wanted to subscribe to your newsletter, it's essentially creating an RSS feed. Okay? It is essentially creating an address on the internet that somebody says, hey, I want that, and it pulls it from that. That's what it is. Yes, the UK is directly next to the UP. And in fact, I believe that King Charles is now working at the Youpers. So yeah, Bruce, you are correct. Okay, before I get to Chinto's big thing here, let's do this. Hi, Corey. This is CK. How much does it cost to start one? Great question. Get ready. Buckle up. It can be zero. You could have a podcast tonight. It depends on what you want to do with it. Okay. Oh, Bruce, is this actually what it's called? Really simple syndication? Because that might be it. That might be it. If not, shut up, Bruce. No, I think you're right. I think you probably Googled it and you're helping me out there. So Corey, starting a podcast. When I say it could be zero, you could literally record on the voice memo on your phone and take that and post it to YouTube or post it to Facebook. It's a podcast. Cost was zero. So like I do this thing for our newsletter called 5 Questions. Okay. It's supposed to be 3 questions. I ask like 5 to 10. Don't ask. Rules don't work for me. Uh, so I do this interview. I do not put it on an RSS feed. I put it only on our newsletter. It costs me nothing. I use a free program to record it. Now, there was a cost up front because I'm using a microphone and a computer. But technically, I could just take my phone and do it. The only cost you have is you have to have a computer. You have to. If you do it from technically, I guess you could do it from your phone even. So maybe you don't need a computer. Editing software. You can use Audacity, which is free. The cost can be 0. Now, do I recommend that? No. You could also take your podcast and put it on SoundCloud. That creates a free RSS feed for your show, but you're limited in how much you can do. So if you're only going to do 2 hours a month, I think it is, go ahead and do SoundCloud. The problem is you don't get any statistics. You can't grow from it. It doesn't do anything good for you, really. But it's another outlet. I used to take all our shows and put it on there until I realized it really wasn't adding up to numbers. I was just getting a lot of people trying to sell me their music. Not great. I mean, what did I care, right? Realistically, if I was to say, okay, you're coming to me and you want to start a podcast, the first thing I would do is I have a getting started guide. It's free. I can send it to you. In fact, you could go to thepodcastprofs.com, and when you sign up there, it's got a loss leader on there. It should still be there, that you get the getting started guide for free. Or just send me a text or message and I'll send it to you. And basically it just tells you, here's what you can do for free. Here's the software. Here's how you start it. Bam. That's it. Like I said, technically it can be free. If we're not going the free route, if you're like, no, I want to have something a little bit better, you don't have to invest in a microphone like this. It took me probably 8 years into it to buy a Shure microphone like this. This is the real deal. This is the best podcast microphone I've heard, period. I think they're around $300, something like that. I have another Shure microphone right there. It's about a $700 microphone. That's for voiceover. Do you need that? No. We had a show. It was a gaming show, video games. And the guy had this microphone. It sounded great. He used Audacity to edit it, so it was free editing. He would send me the file. I would post it for him. Didn't cost him anything. And I was like, man, his mic sounds incredible. So I wrote to him. I'm like, hey, man, I have a question. What mic are you using? Because other podcasters want to know, and it sounds great. And he's like, I don't want to tell you. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't work in our network. We're open and we tell the truth. What is it? He goes, I still don't want to tell you. I'm like, is it embarrassing? Yes. It was a Rock Band microphone from his PlayStation. So he bought Rock Band. It came with a microphone. It was about a $10 mic, but it sounded great. Okay. I also know people that just use the mic on their camera. They use the mic on their phone. The thing is, as you get further into it and you start progressing, a lot of times what'll happen is you'll want to upgrade. You'll want to go to something like this. But keep in mind, we're at 11 years of me doing this. That's why we get a mic like this. We were doing professional voiceover work. The whole family was. So we buy one of these. Would I have bought that in the beginning? Hell no. You don't want to go into this spending all this money to have it go. I actually consulted with a guy that was totally doing that. And I kept telling him I would not spend all this money. He bought mixers. He bought like 5 mics because he was like, I'm going to have a room full of people. I'm like, do you have a room full of people that want to do it? He goes, no. But eventually he bought iPads and stands and all this stuff. And I was like, dude, I don't do that. And I mean, I do a lot of this. The extra equipment I have, the mixers, the mics, those are because we did live shows all the time. And I needed that equipment like a band would, right? But if I'm just podcasting here, I don't need this mic. I could grab a $10 microphone, a $20 microphone. It would be just fine. Would it sound great? No. Over time, I mean, that one did. I don't know why. But over time, yeah, I'd probably want to upgrade it, make it sound better. But does it have to go this high? This one, I think, is actually reasonable. Like everybody in the beginning bought Blue Yetis. Those were about $130. I had one for years. It sounded like tin to me. Eventually, switched to this. I mean, it was years before I switched to this. Oh, here's a good suggestion. Chinto, you can do it for free at the library. All right, Corey. See? Go to your library. If you're near Bolingbrook, we have a podcast room with interface microphones and a computer. Check your local library. That is a great suggestion. The other thing is there are I don't know what you call them, like business or entrepreneur hives in a lot of cities. I've spoken at them where it's like a place, like a business center that'll be set up by the city where you can take some classes, hear a speaker, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of them have a little podcast set up and you can go up and you can record a podcast and they've got everything you need. And there might even be somebody there that'll edit it for you. Now, do you need to edit? No, you don't. If you treat it like a radio show, you don't need to edit anything. So like this show, I could take the audio off of this, put it on Libsyn. It would push out to Apple and everywhere else. And I wouldn't touch a thing. The only thing I would want to do is put music at the beginning and the end. But do you even need to do that? No. And do you even need to send it to those places? No. I told you, 3 Questions is a podcast. It lives only on our newsletter. And now I'm starting to put it on YouTube. I have a podcast. Well, this you could technically call a podcast. This only lives here for now. But I have a podcast that I do that I always say is not a podcast. It's a paranormal one because I don't have a schedule for it. I don't advertise it. It's in a private Facebook group. I don't know. There's 40 people in there. But every time I do it, I get a lot of comments, a lot of people listening in there. But it's this private group. Doesn't cost me a thing. I don't even put music on that one. I record. I usually do an interview. I'll contact somebody. I'll use the Zoom, the free service on Zoom. I'll record a half hour with them, take it, and just upload it immediately to that Facebook group. So it's like there's no editing. There's nothing. You get the raw stuff. Now, going back to what Shoshana said when you said about Patreon, that was one of our greatest things. The best podcast we ever did was one called Broken to Brave. And it was Maeve's podcast that she had created, dealing with like trauma and her life. And it's just a fantastic podcast. I don't want to cry, so I'm not going to go deep into it. But the main podcast were just these 50 episodes, and they were all like 3 minutes long. Okay. But then we had a Patreon page, and we did that for 4 years. So there's 200 episodes, close to it. And that was just her and I sitting on a couch. We used an MP3 recorder and 2 microphones. And we just recorded. And then the only thing I do to edit it is I would clip the beginning, or if somebody was like, hold on, I got to go to the bathroom. So the editing was like minimal. And we'd have an hour a week, and it lived only on Patreon, only for the Patreon subscribers. Now, when Southgate Media Group kicks back in, we're going to go back to our thing. We have a Patreon page for Southgate Media Group. And what we would do is every new episode, I would put it on there for free. And then each podcast every year has to do 1 or 2 original podcasts just for the Patreon. So you pay, $5 a month, and you get like 4 original episodes of things. Some of them are tests. Some of our podcasts were born out of those because somebody tried it and they're like, hey, this is really cool. And then the patrons would be like, yeah, that's really cool. Okay, let's make a podcast out of it. Kind of an incubator, So yeah, Patreon is great for podcasts. It's great if you use it the right way. But giving away free stuff, why not? Do a bunch of free things and then have a level where you charge. There's a podcast that I really like called Mysterious Universe. I believe they're Australian. And they do a thing where they have their show for free on Spotify, Apple, wherever. At the end of their show, it's usually like, I want to say it's a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. They'll start up a new topic and it will start to fade out. And it says, if you want to hear the rest of the episode, go to our Patreon. $5 a month, you can hear the whole thing. It's worth it. It's totally worth it because you're so engaged in this show and they're switching topics. You're like, oh, but I want to hear about that. $5. Okay, I'm not going to buy a Starbucks today because now I got the whole month of listening to their show. And I don't always subscribe to it, but I do, and it's fantastic. Oh, man, Bruce, you're already leaving. Bye, Bruce. Okay, I got lots of questions on here. Here we go. When me and Maria did our wrestling podcast, we didn't really have a goal or plan, but then it just blew up, and we had pro wrestlers actually talk to us and request to be a part of it. Yeah, man, it's great. But now that I'm trying to start a new podcast, I'm finding it hard because the first one was effortless and I'm fearing failing. So I guess my first goal is just starting a new podcast. Yes. Chinto, you know what? I sent you the thing. Do the free session. We won't talk about like your marketing stuff. Do the free session with me. Let's talk about what your idea for the podcast is, and then I'll help get you over that hump because this is what I've done. I've started so many people with podcasts, people that keep, a great example is Jesse. He won't mind me telling the story because he's told it a million times. So Jesse Jackson, as he says, not that one, was on a Doctor Who podcast on our network. He was in other networks on other shows. And after he'd been with us for maybe a year, I did a check-in with everybody. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Do you like what you're doing? Is there anything you'd like to change? And he said, well, I've got this idea for another podcast, but I figure you'll say no. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, I love Bruce Springsteen. I want to do a show called Set Lusting Bruce, all about Bruce Springsteen. And I was like, how's that going to work? Maeve is the one that said immediately, yes, don't even hesitate. Yes. And he was kind of having that second guessing, and she said, just record one, Jesse. And he said, well, I don't know how. He said, how about if me, Rob, if you come on and interview me for the first episode, that'll be my first episode and that'll kind of launch it. He needed somebody to hold his hand to get it launched, right? Here it's 10 years later of this show. He's done hundreds. It has led to him meeting Bruce Springsteen and other people in the band. He's gotten lots of press for it. Like, it's crazy. And the thing is, it's not just about Bruce Springsteen. I thought, man, there's no way he's going to make it 12 episodes. And he's in the hundreds now. But he expanded the idea and he kept going with it. And he got over that hump. His first goal was just, how do I get over that hump? And it was, he needed me to interview him. Okay. If that's all it needed, he needed Maeve to say yes. And he needed me to interview him. And then he just shot out of a cannon. And yeah, Chinto, you are right. You started talking to professional wrestlers and that, it can lead to all sorts of things. Depends on what you want to do with it. I've got an interview with a filmmaker tomorrow morning that just fell into my lap because a guy's doing a film festival in LA, and he wrote me and he said, any way you can interview this guy? It's a guy who's done all these Metallica videos. He's done these really cool horror films. And I'm like, yeah, the guy and I are sitting here texting back and forth. His stuff is amazing. Yeah. And I'll figure out what to do with it. Okay, let's see. A lot of things here. I have a basic headphone with mic, and people tell me it sounds great. All you'd have to do is go to Audacity and hit record. Now you got a show. Save it, and I can walk you through what you got to do next to have a podcast. Valerie. Hi, Valerie. We wore out our Rock Band mic. Our main library has a recording room. Many colleges also have places and students who could assist. Note that your tone of voice for females may impact what mic works well. Very true. I would start with room, location, and pop filters. I wouldn't even start with pop filters. If it is sounding funny, stick a sock over your mic. Also, eating a green apple before talking helps. That's a great tip. Another one that I've heard for getting it tends to sound better if your voice gets into its lower range rather than in the upper nasally part. And a trick is to, and I don't do this, but I know people that do, they take a shot of whiskey or something like that because it loosens the vocal cords, and then their voice sounds nice and deep. I already sound dopey and drunk, and I am not. I figure, man, if I sound that way now, imagine. Oh, which is why I'm drinking lemon water tonight, not even coffee. And I love indie podcasts. Want to make money at your podcast? Figure out ways to make swag. Okay. Doesn't mean you're going to sell 1 million t-shirts, but there is a strategy for it. For this, I made these. I've sold a few. Do I do anything to sell them? No. But I don't really promote it either. So if you want one, let me know. I'm starting figuratively at editing Audacity. Music at the beginning. The whole technical part scares the hell out of me. Shoshana, I'll send you the getting started guide. Really, you don't have to add music. Figure out what you want to talk about and just hit record. Don't edit. Don't edit. Tell yourself you're not going to edit it. So when you start it, know what you're going to say at the beginning, know what you're going to say at the end. You might even want to write them out. Hi, this is Shoshana, your friendly neighborhood author. Today I want to talk about blank. Then talk. Then at the end, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to catch my next newsletter where the next episode of the Shoshana Show will be free to you. Out. Let's see. I make S. I don't think you meant stound. I think you meant sound. So you've got that. That's yeah. A lot of people have that. Very common. That's the kind of thing that, first of all, if you start paying attention, listen to podcasts, you'll hear it all the time. I've got one much worse than the S that I can't stand. That's the click. People do that when they talk. Before they start a sentence, they'll do that, or at the end. Once you're aware of it, all the time. I don't do it because I have trained myself very, very rarely do I have to edit one out. And in fact, if you look at my podcast that I do now, the editing is so minimal. Like this interview I'm doing in the morning, I'll interview him at 10. I will have that show uploaded. As long as he goes 10 to 10:30, I'll have it uploaded by 11 o'clock. Done. Okay, that's a big fear of mine. My voice is so high. It is not, Serena. I have a story for you. I think it makes me sound like a jerk. But the person that did this with me did not. In fact, she put it in our book, which I don't have over here, but Pod Life. She wrote it in her chapter about being a podcaster. And her name is Blair. She went on product placement. Got it. There's my book. Get it now before it's published by Four Horsemen, because then it's going to be a different cover and a different book a little bit. So we still have those too. So anyway, here's her story. And this goes back to what you said about her big fear. So Blair, it's in her chapter. The first time I met her was at C2E2, I believe. It was either that or Wizard World in Chicago. And I was really excited. I'm walking around the corner, and she'd been podcasting for about 6 months with us, was doing a couple of different shows. She was great. Really liked Blair. And I walk around the corner, and there she is. She's like, oh, yay. And I'm like, oh, my God, that's you. And she comes up and she says, I'm going to quit podcasting. And I went, what? She goes, my voice, it's squeaky and awful. I said, who's telling you that? She said, well, it was in the comments. She said, my greatest fear. She said, I always thought that. And then somebody was putting it in the comments on Apple. And I said, hold on a second. First of all, it's not. Serena, it's not. It's not. In her case, I was her podcast boss, right? This is where I sound like a jerk, but I truly meant it. I said, honest to God, Blair, when somebody says something like that to you, whose opinion actually matters? And she said, no, I know. And I said, no, tell me who. And she said, her, me. And I said, no, your opinion doesn't matter at all. My opinion matters because I'm the one putting you on. That's why I sound like a jerk. But I wasn't being a jerk. I was trying to get her to understand. And she said it really made her realize until I tell her, hey, let's try some things to bring your voice down a little bit, or there's things we can do. Go with what you're doing. I'm thrilled with what you're doing. And was it squeaky and high? No, not at all. She had a great voice. Serena, I've heard your voice. Not a squeaky voice. What we hear of our voice is very different from what the outside world hears. I get a lot of compliments on my voice. Okay. I hear it completely differently than you guys do. I say, thank you. Oh, that's cool. Or, yeah, I sound dopey and drunk. When I edit myself, I'm always like, oh my God, listen to my voice. It's natural. It's natural. We all feel that way. Now, if somebody were to say to me, man, that sounds terrible, I might have to explore that. But if some rando is telling you it's squeaky or whatever, who cares? Let's hear their voice. Okay. Tanya, if anyone needs a podcast idea for people that go to cons about making parts and pieces, talk to me. I have lots of ideas, podcasts and more, just not an avenue where my art will go. So, Tanya, are you saying ideas for podcasts, or are you saying for people to guest on podcasts? Or do you want to call it randomness out of Tanya? See, that might be a podcast right there. I hate the click. Just got triggered. I do too. I hate it. I hate the click. The other thing I hate is the breath. A lot of professional broadcasters, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. They do this as they're talking. They'll say, if anyone needs a podcast idea for people out there at cons, because they've been trained to grab as much air as they can for the long sentences, it sounds terrible. To me, it's a byproduct of eating the mic. I'm not eating the mic. One fist away. Stay a fist away. If it's too low, and check your mic level. You guys don't hear me breathing. I'm a heavy breather, so you might hear some breathing, but you don't hear those, and you don't hear those clicks. We're talking about imposter syndrome. We all have it. Some of the greatest authors I know have it. Think of it this way. I have not read this yet. Let's see what we got here, Shoshana. If one person says you're an ass, is that what you're going to say? You can say ass on here. Dismiss it. If 25 do, maybe we should look into saddles. Yeah, exactly. We all have imposter syndrome. It took me a while to start this show because of imposter syndrome. It's okay. How do you get over imposter syndrome? You close in and you dive in the water and you see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? It's okay. So Tanya says she's full of ideas for podcasts. Well, Tanya, you could always talk to me. People ask me all the time. Unless your podcast is ASMR, distance from the mic is key. It is. It is. Okay. So now I want to talk about the marketing aspect of this. So one of the reasons that we're starting Southgate Media Group up again is because of marketing. Okay. You guys as artists, as writers, as entrepreneurs, you have to understand that podcasting is a very intimate medium. Think about it. Where do you listen to your podcasts? Now here, we're watching it on here. We're having a moment. And a lot of people have said, it feels like I'm like talking to my friend and I feel connected. Yeah. Intimate medium. But the audio one is even more intimate. The reason is it's in your head. You're out taking a walk. You put in headphones, put on a podcast. You start feeling a connection to the host. How many of you feel like you know the host because you've been listening to them? A lot of us do. My trick is I actually contact them, interview them, and I become friends with them. That's how you do it. But the reality is it's intimate. It's something that's in your head. You hear this voice and you start recognizing that voice. You may not know the name of the host. I've listened to some shows for years and not known the names of the hosts. It just doesn't register. But hell, if I don't know exactly what that person is thinking and where they're at, you start learning things about them that stick, which is why advertising on a podcast, it is a longer term thing, right? But super effective. If I have 10 listeners that listen to me all the time, and then I finally say to these 10 listeners, you know, this that coffee that I was drinking, that dark matter was the greatest. I love it. You know, you can order it. Chances are good a few of those people are going to seek out dark matter because they feel like, hey, I have a connection with Rob. Rob likes this. I should try it. It's intimate. And I love that. I love that part of it for marketing. If you're looking for, I'm going to move the needle really fast with podcasting, not usually. But over time, having a commitment to it, being honest and real, yeah, it becomes an incredible marketing tool. There you go, Shoshana. All the rooms in my brain. What a great name for a podcast. But once again, Shoshana, you just record something. Throw it on your newsletter. Don't worry about sound and all that. Just throw it up there. Just write an intro, write an outro, see what happens. That's all you got to do. A lot of listeners build parasocial relationships with their favorite podcaster. Absolutely. I watch it with YouTubers. Look at how popular these YouTubers are, where people feel like, oh my God, and they feel like they're the new celebrity and they feel this connection. It is a different connection, though. They're having the celebrity fan connection, which you have with like movie stars, which can also be very dramatic. But the parasocial relationship, that's the one that we build with a writer. That's the one we build with a broadcaster, a voice in our head. Same idea. Think about it. Writing is a voice in your head. You read it and you're putting in all the voices and the things, and you get a good writer. Like when I read Kurt Vonnegut, I love it. I love how, when he was alive, how he wrote. There is a voice coming through those pages that's in there. So if I ever got to meet him, I would be like, I know him, even though I don't. Same thing with podcasters. How long should a podcast be? That's called a rule. And I don't want to throw any of my paper away, but take that rule, crumple it up, throw it away. There's no rules. If you hear there are rules, like if you Google how long should a podcast be, you will find people that'll say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, no more. Okay. So when it was actually Jesse had a fantastic thing happen to him once when he was doing Set Listing Bruce. It wasn't that show. It was his other show. And his other show was about a TV show, and they didn't have a heck of a lot to talk about with it. They talked and had fun, but the show would come out to 17 minutes, almost to a dot every time. Not because he was trying to, it's just what happened. And a listener wrote in and said, I love your show more than any other podcast because it is the perfect length for me to walk my dog and it to take a poop. So it was the Dog Poop Podcast is what we would call it internally, because it was always 17 minutes, which apparently is the amount of time it takes to walk your dog and let them take their poop and get them back home. So Jesse could argue that 17 minutes is exactly the best time. Now take another friend of mine. He's an Irish podcaster. He's in Ireland. And his numbers are huge. Huge. Like TV shows don't have his numbers. It's crazy. Largest I've ever heard for a podcast, and it's real. I talked to him about this because people always ask this, and I said, what's your thought on this? Because my thought is there are no rules. And he was like, there's no rules. And he said, look at my show. It's that big. He said, some shows are an hour. He's got shows, a lot of shows that are over 4 hours. He's like, if I listen to the rules, no one would get those shows. He says, I don't believe that there's a time length. as long as it's interesting. Now, if you're going to put it on your newsletter, keep it short. If you're going to put it on a feed, you can go with whatever. I mean, I listen to shows where I listen for a half hour while I'm out, then I come back to it later. So length doesn't matter. I mean, I've even listened to shows that are 5. There's an amazing Paul McCartney podcast right now. It's called, oh man, it's really worth it. It'll be worth me looking it up. Man, I do a lot of podcasts. I can't find it this quickly. Recently played. Here we go. It's called A Life in Lyrics. Paul McCartney, A Life in Lyrics. It's 2 seasons. The episodes are between 10 and 15 minutes long. Each of them is just a little story about what the songs were actually about, how he wrote it, what it's about. It's amazing. Amazing. 10, 15 minutes. Is there a rule? No. Let's see. My realization about this was when I was listening to a podcast a British professor did during pandemic. He talked about world history. Then I found out he passed away. I was crushed and I never met him. We're talking about parasocial relationships. Yeah, no kidding. There was a guy on, was it Rebel FM? Or he was the other one. It was a video game podcast. And the funny thing is, I didn't realize how much I liked this guy on there. There were like 4 hosts, and I really enjoyed all the guys. But this one guy, like, I didn't think anything in particular. He died. Okay. They continued on. Same guys. Same fun. I was crushed. I felt really bad. And I'd listen to it and be like grieving. And I'm like, I don't know this guy. But yeah, it was that relationship. He was in my head. And when he died, something was gone. It's why, like, we have a show called Disturbed where we did American Horror Story. It was just Chris and I. When Chris died, it was a very popular show for us, one of our biggest. And I had to put out on Facebook, I'm like, I can't do this. I want somebody to take it over. And we had a couple of fans that were like considering it. And they're like, yeah, but Chris isn't there. I'd rather the show not be produced than have the show come back without Chris. Because they developed a relationship with Chris. Did Chris ever know? No, he had no idea. I didn't know who these fans were. They started writing me afterwards. Okay. Empty the Dog. That's a good name for a podcast. And gross. I want to do a controversial one. Talk about the environment, pollution on Earth and in space, misogyny, art, politics, greed, etc. Or is that just the Washington Post? Yeah. So one thing I'll tell you about that, Corey. Absolutely, you could do that. But I would not necessarily make that your author one, only because of the alienation. It could alienate certain people and turn them off. Now, you can have one under the name Corey Westbrook, and you can say you're an author and do all that kind of stuff. But then if you were doing an author one, do a separate author one where maybe you interview authors and you kind of stay away from some of it. In our network, one of the things we always say, no sex, no politics. Just stay away from them. You can give your opinion, short things here and there, but like even on here, like if I were to sit here and talk about my feelings about politics, I would alienate some of you. Well, that's not the point of this. Now, if it was like what you're talking about, having a controversial show, go for it. Just remember, if you're using it for brand building for you as CK Westbrook, controversy can backfire. So be careful. Yeah, the no bullshit vegan. See, now there's a case. That's a great one. The way they approach it is definitely more aggressive, I would say. Could be considered controversial by some, but who cares? That is on brand for them. I want to teach people about aspects of writing that involvement, connection with your inner self. I want to talk about what I find in these rooms, and it isn't all light and joy. There's trauma, there's grief, there's loss, and there's great joy. Yeah. It's almost like a personal journal. No rules. But for you, I absolutely wouldn't go through all the rigmarole of a podcast. I would record it and say, hey, can you attach this to my newsletter? Done. Easy peasy. Put it on my Facebook page. Put it on my Instagram's a little bit trickier. Facebook page, really easy. Really easy. But don't do all the other things. You don't need to. You know, people that write like a blog, treat it like a blog. Blogs, some blogs are all pretty and have all the things, and some blogs are a little bit more raw and they're just my thoughts. Day 1, day 2, day 3. That's all you need to do. That works. Yes, Corey, I know. And you know what? This is why I said you could get away with doing a show like that. It's just if you're going to do specifically an author-centric podcast, it's just like your Facebook page. You're not going to dive into the deep end and just push buttons. You know where to say certain things and where not to. But you can be completely controversial, right? And if you did a talk show that was like that, go for it. Go for it all the way. I mean, you definitely don't shy away from things. But if we're talking a promotional piece, which is what I was meaning, I guess I should have said that, a promotional piece for you as an author, have a shorter, tamer thing that you do in conjunction with that. I hope that made sense. I hope that made sense. And Shoshana, yes, that is why Molly does Shoshana's social media for her and helps her with her newsletter. So if you need somebody to help with social media, contact me, contact Molly. She does do that. And look at Shoshana's stuff. I think she does an absolutely wonderful job with it. So now I understand. I really hope I was clear about that. I know it's a little bit tricky. Well, we did it. I don't know if I got to everything I wanted to talk about, but we got darn close. Let me do my plugs here. Let's see. Share screen again. I've got 2 newsletters, Pour Over Marketing and Mic Drop. Mic Drop, I just did the first post I've done in a while. That is going to be a regular thing. And I believe starting next week, Pour Over is going to be a weekly newsletter as well. That's on top of the one I do for the authors only. And then let's see. I have a YouTube channel for this, which I still have not fixed, but you can subscribe at New Media Lab Pod on YouTube. Or you can go to Southgate Media Group because we are about to kick things back in. And we are also going to start upping the game on the 4 Horsemen YouTube channel. So please subscribe to the 4 Horsemen Publications YouTube channel. Lots of fun stuff coming there. For Southgate Media Group, we're here. We're everywhere. Okay. As I said last time, I'm Roy Kent. I'm here. I'm there. I'm every freaking where. You can email me directly at rob@smgpods.com, or if you know me other ways, I've got a million emails, but they all funnel back to the same 2 email accounts. But this is an easy one rather than having to write out Southgate Media Group. And I just am so proud to be able to say this again. This has been brought to you by Southgate Media Group. Been a long time since we said that. We are officially back. We are officially in the growing stage. When I say podcast network, it is not. It is a media group. So we're helping with shows that live on TikTok, that live on Instagram, that are living only here on Facebook, or that are in RSS feeds and going to your ear, that are on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever. We're helping with all that kind of stuff. It's all part of this network, which is why we named it Media Group to begin with. Let's see. Thank you for coming, Corey. I'm glad that was helpful. And you can always write me too. I do free sessions too. So if you want to have a free session to talk about marketing or talk about any of this stuff, let me know. I'll get you the scheduler and we'll sit down and talk. Chinto, great show. Awesome that there were so many on today. Looking forward to Saturday morning. So am I. Saturday morning, we will be back. What is topic for Pour Over this weekend? I don't know. Have an art show. And if it is something I need to be involved in, I'll try to listen during setup. I don't know yet, Tanya. I was actually thinking of doing another one of our catalyst things where people ask questions and the whole group answers. Just depends if people come with questions. Thank you for the congratulations, Shoshana. It is good to be back and doing our thing. Can I add one thing? Yes. Last comment. Lay it on me, Shoshana. For goodness sake, avoid gimmicks. I have a friend who does what could be a great podcast, except he puts in gimmicks, and it drives me nuts. Yeah, I'm going to say something about that. And this is maybe not what you mean, but it is the same idea. So I have these friends that have this really great podcast. And it's big, right? If you listen to the first, I don't know, 40 episodes, they're almost unlistenable because of the gimmicky part of it. They tell these great urban legends and paranormal stories and that, but they were adding all these sound effects in that, so it sounded very cheesy, annoying as hell. I don't know how they got an audience once they ditched the gimmicks and they went, and now it's like they're honest and they're themselves. It's fantastic. Oh, and a plug. Go listen to one of Fred's Front Porch. He has some free stuff. Free stuff's always good. All right, that's it. We are done. It's 8:06. We've gone overtime. Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Central. I'll be here. The coffee will be hot. And yeah, we're into it. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. We will see you in a few days. Until then, think about questions and get marketing.